welcome back to Classic Car Restoration. The ignition on our 1962 Thunderbird Sports Roadster project car is a mechanical breaker point type. Now, they were very reliable, but the only problem is they require regular maintenance in order to maintain good horsepower, clean emissions, and easy starting. The thing is, the points in these things tend to get pitted or corroded or just wear out, and if you don't change them annually, you can expect an awful lot of headaches, really. Well, we can do better now in the form of a direct bolt-in kit that replaces the breaker plate and points with solid-state magnetic trigger components. The manufacturer claims a doubling of the spark energy, which will give us better ignition, cleaner emissions, and more horsepower, along with a smoother idle and faster startup. It's a simple job. Let's get started. We begin by taking the distributor cap off, setting up out of the way. Pull the rotor off. I remove the breaker plate here, which houses the contact points and the pivot arm. I disconnect the coil wire at the negative side. The condenser also comes out. Okay, and it's out with the old. The superior alternative is the conversion kit, which basically has a magnetic trigger that goes by a sensor on the end of this module, which transfers magnetic signals into electronic signals and fires the plugs. There's no moving parts, it's solid state, and it provides twice the spark output as the stock point type system. So we'll have better fuel economy, more power, faster startups, and longer plug life. It's a win-win situation, and this bolts in a half an hour. Because our terminal ends won't go through the hole of the distributor body, I gently bend them using needle-nose pliers, then I can insert them through the hole. I pull the wires until I can seat the rubber grommet in the hole, which will keep moisture out of the distributor. Then I can attach the ground wire and screw to the base of the new unit and secure the new module onto the plate. Next comes the magnetic trigger wheel. This fits down over the stock cam that used to run the points. Pops right in place. It's important to check that there is enough clearance between the magnetic trigger and the pickup. To do this, use the 30 thousandths thick gauge that comes with the kit and insert it between the parts. Ours is fine, and the module can be tightened down. Then I go back and gently flatten out the wire terminals so I can attach them to the coil. I attach the black wire to the negative side of the coil and attach the red wire to the positive side of the coil. We have to remember to install the wire that comes from the ballast resistor and the ignition key on top of the wire that runs from the module for the electronic ignition. And that gets tightened down. The next step is to simply install the rotor back onto the distributor, but because we want to get full performance out of our new ignition, we're going to upgrade the cap, the rotor, and the wires and the plugs. So the old rotor actually goes into the dumpster, and we'll replace it with a brand new one. And that's done. Takes about a half an hour to upgrade from points to a breakerless solid-state ignition. It's a nice deal. Continuing our ignition upgrade, we'll change the original cap with a new replacement. Just put it right on like this. Now here's a trick that'll help to remove some of the confusion about changing these wires. This kind of looks like an octopus with all these wires sticking out of it, and it's easy to get these confused. If you do, the firing order on the motor will be wrong, and you won't be able to start it. So if you change them one at a time, using, basically find a reference point from that tab to that. We'll change this one here first. Hang on, we'll go clockwise. Do them one at a time. This way, you won't get lost. And then finally the coil wire is transferred. And the old distributor cap can go in the trash. Now we can see the thing that wears out distributor caps is electronic erosion between the rotor and these terminals. And if you can see any scratches or any kind of pitting or erosion, you know it's time to change the cap. We also decided to change out the spark plug wires, upgrading to high-quality silicone 7mm wires, which will ensure a good link between the distributor and the spark plugs. And as before, I used the one-at-a-time system of removing the old wires and installing the new ones. I pull each wire out one at a time and compare it with the new ones and select the right length wire. These are custom wire sets, so they won't need any cutting. They're ready to go. Then I simply install the wires and run them to the corresponding spark plug. The final link in our ignition upgrade is a fresh set of spark plugs. Now, just because they're new doesn't mean they're right. Sometimes rough handling can cause the gaps on these things to close up, so I always check them before we install them. In this case here, we'll see that we have 38 thousandths, which is right on the money. And because we're installing these spark plugs into aluminum cylinder heads, we want to be sure to use some anti-seize compound on the threads to prevent galling and sticking, like so. When we come back, we'll finish up some of these underhood details and upgrade to halogen headlamps. Our project car is in excellent shape mechanically, but it's still looking pretty ragged. Now it's time to dig into the cosmetics and turn our car into the beauty it once was. Join me as we begin the body and trim restoration of our 1962 Thunderbird Sports Roadster. Welcome to Classic Car Restoration. I'm your host, Steve Magnanti. When we started our restoration project, we started with a car that had a lot of potential but needed plenty of work. So far, we've serviced the suspension, drive shaft, fuel system, and the brakes. We've upgraded the differential and exhaust system. And then we upgraded the engine with new aluminum cylinder heads, intake manifold, and a performance carburetor, all of which bring our stock Thunderbird's 300 horsepower rating up to about 350. Now it's time to turn our attention to the body of the car. Two of the biggest enemies of any car are water and air. You don't want to hear any rattles of the metal parts as you're driving. And of course, water can get inside the car and cause rust and deterioration. Which brings us to the subject of weather stripping. Weather stripping is one of the most often overlooked areas of any automotive restoration, but it shouldn't be that way because it's one of the easiest things we can do at home. Here to help us evaluate the weather stripping situation on our 62 Thunderbird project car is Walter Vaughn from the Steel Rubber Products Company.
Good to see you, Steve.
Good to see you. Now tell me, is aftermarket weather stripping available for most any application?
Basically, any car from the 1920s to the new cars that are popular have rubber parts available.
Now, what are some of the biggest enemies of weather stripping? What causes it to wear out the fastest?
Sunlight and ozone are the two biggest enemies of rubber.
What are the classic symptoms?
Well, the rubber starts breaking apart. It'll just basically crumble. Since rubber is an organic compound, it's affected by the same things that makes our faces age.
Well, let's go ahead and get started.
All right, Steve. Well, the first thing I see is this quarter window leading edge weather strip. It's all breaking apart here and it's flecking away. This definitely needs to be replaced. It's one of the easiest things to replace on a car. Now, typically this should slide right out, but it's been in there an awful long time. So the best thing that we can probably do is just jerk on it to pull it out. Get started here. And it'll pull right out. We're going to replace it with a brand new one. Now typically how these go in is that the sharp end that's got an angle goes to the bottom on hardtops and convertibles. They almost all look that way, all makes and models. Now what we want to do is there's a track inside here and we'll get it from the bottom and we'll slide it up. The problem is we're going to get probably halfway up with it and it's not going to want to go anymore. So what I'm going to do, if it won't go up real easy, is spray it with some soap dissolution.
Okay, a little lubrication,
A little lubrication.
Okay.
And make sure I get it on the top piece.
Get a leading edge.
Leading edge, exactly.
Okay.
And it should go in a lot easier.
Walter and I continue around the car, evaluating and replacing the weather stripping as needed. The door weather stripping is also aged and cracked and will need to be replaced. To do that, Walter removes the screws at the top of the old weather stripping. Then he uses an adhesive remover to loosen the glue. The solvent is designed not to hurt the paint finish. Soon he can peel away the rubber as he continues to spray the area with the adhesive remover. You can also use a plastic putty knife to help with the process, being careful not to chip the paint. Walter continues around the door, peeling off the rubber from the underside and to the end of the stripping which runs up the vent window sill. Use more adhesive remover as necessary to loosen any remaining rubber. It's important to remove all traces of old rubber and adhesive so the new weather stripping can bond to a clean, flat surface. Once the surface is clean and dry, we can start applying the weather strip adhesive. The adhesive is applied to the door frame in a thin line, then Walter uses a finger to spread it out. He also applies the adhesive directly to the back side of the new weather stripping. This is a contact type cement, so it is important to apply it to both surfaces. And again, he uses a finger to spread it out some. And then we're ready to install the new weather stripping. Walter screws the top in as I hold the strip. It's a good idea to have an extra pair of hands when you're doing this. And we simply continue around the door and up the other side, securing the end of the strip to the vent window sill. The end, like the beginning of the strip, is held in place with a screw, and the door is done. While we're at it, there are a few more weather stripping areas that we can replace. A new cowl vent seal simply goes into place. The cowl panel goes back on top of that. We use an awl to punch holes into the new rubber, and then the cowl panel is screwed back down. And the last thing that we do is replace the hood bumpers. These will keep the hood from rattling and simply screw into place. Keep in mind, if you need any more information on replacing the weather stripping on your car, or on any of the other repairs or upgrades we've done, just visit our website at DIYnetwork.com. When we come back, we'll clean the dirt and grime off the exterior of our car and bring the shine back to our classic '62 Thunderbird Sports Roadster.